Mud, shark. Hello everyone, Richard here at Calvin Wazoo, and we're doing another installment in Frank Zappa, one album at a time, and this time it is the Mothers, Fillmore East, June 1971. The clear line in the sand in which an era of the Mothers is launched, that for many people, they either love it or they hate it. Interesting reactions, and we'll kind of explore why that might be the case. The recording, this album, was done in June 1971, 2 nights, June 5th and June 6th. And there were, I believe, 2 shows each night. Now, Zappa had a ton of material from these 2 nights of gigs. I know for a fact there had to have been at least 3 shows, because in the final night there were, definitely 2 shows. I don't know about the first night, but I'm presuming there were probably 2 shows. So yeah, he had a lot of material. And he considered putting it out as a double album. But there was an incident that happened during the show, pretty famous incident, and that was on the final night during the last show. And that was when John Lennon and Yoko Ono joined the Mothers on stage. By the way, it's, middle afternoon Sunday, so I'm enjoying a glass of wine as I tell you about this. So, John Lennon had just moved into New York, he and Yoko. And I'm guessing they did move into the Dakotas right away, but I'm not sure about that timing. Anyway, Lennon was kind of getting acclimated to New York, and he was out with a writer from the Village Voice, Howard Smith. He was a columnist with the Village Voice, and he mentioned to Lennon that he needed to interview Frank Zappa. So this would have been, I'm guessing, June 6th, because they were already in a hotel, the Mothers, they played the night before. So I'm guessing that Smith, was going to be doing the interview, after their first show in preparation for that night's show, perhaps, something like that. Anyway, Lennon was like, oh, wow, really? Can I go along? I'd really love to meet him. So according to Howard's recollection of the story, John Lennon was expressing great admiration for Zappa, in particular, the way he controlled the orchestra, so to speak, with his conducting the band, how he was able to get ideas, very specific ideas, musical ideas that were in his head, and in a band that could then play this material back. So yeah, Lennon was, had a great deal of admiration. Plus, he also said that Zappa, in his opinion, was really the only one out there at that time, we're talking 1970, 71, 72, out this time, that was really doing anything different, unique with music. And, Lennon really admired that. So, all right, they went along, he went along. And when they got to where the mothers were staying, Zappa opened the door and goes, "Oh, hello. Good to see you." Just very deadpan. Now, there had been, in previous content and also in previous interviews, Zappa wasn't shy about saying how he thought the Beatles were, up until, that point that, they had some really good things, but, by and large, he just wasn't that impressed. And of course, We're Only in It for the Money was an album that was, mocking Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, which the Beatles, for the most part that we understand, at least from what I understand about it, really didn't have that big of a concern over the parody. But anyway, Zappa had said some things, and also, albums that they had produced, were saying some things about the Beatles. And Lennon wasn't really all that concerned with it, even though he was, aware of it. So Zappa, when he's meeting Lennon, he's just very distant, very flat. The rest of the band, though, of the Mothers, they were like, ooh, so excited, And Lennon said he recognized that, he was like this really big star, but in his perspective, meeting Zappa, he was the one who felt in awe to be in Zappa's presence. But he understood by virtue of who he was, the overreaction, he knew that was going to happen with him. Now, it was interesting, Lennon was described as being very deferential to Zappa by Howard Smith. But he also pointed out that Yoko was, if not outwardly hostile, she acted very defensive, because she had this attitude that everything Frank Zappa did, he stole from her. Now, that is Howard Smith explaining that. And, we got to think of the time here. This is, 1971. And for a lot of people who were following the Beatles, listening to the Beatles, writing about the Beatles, interacting with the Beatles, had a very negative point of view about Yoko Ono. I mean, she, was blamed for decades for breaking up the Beatles. I guess it's only recently that Paul McCartney said, no. Who really knows what happened? Because, truth, you have to look at so many different things in order to get truth. So that was Howard Smith's interpretation of why Yoko Ono was acting so hostile to Frank Zappa. And she might not have been acting hostile at all. That's just his impression of the situation. But as another observation he made, Zappa just ignored her completely, like she wasn't even in the room. So the band members started talking about how, wow, this would be really cool if they could get John and Yoko to come out on stage during the show, and play with them for a while. And initially, Frank was really diffident. He really wasn't keen on the idea. But he gradually warmed up to the notion and, thought, oh yeah, this might be a good idea. All right, so it's the second show, and it's the third encore, and it's like 2 a.m. on a Sunday, okay? So a lot of people from the show have left already, or some of them are going, they're on their way out of the auditorium when John Lennon and Yoko Ono step out on stage. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. It was cited in the Barry Miles book about Zappa that John and Yoko were so nervous about coming out on stage with Frank and the Mothers that they did a bunch of cocaine to bolster their nerve and come out on stage. Now, there's a video of this. Perhaps many of you have seen it. There is a link to that video in the Down Under. And Rachel, the Music Man, she talked, in her entry, her contest entry for the contest I'm hosting, she talks about this show, and how it appeared, in a John Lennon album. So, to kind of segue a little bit, they played together, but Frank anticipated that there were going to be problems in terms of negotiating the rights. So that's why he ended up releasing this as just a single album instead of a double album. Now, I don't have the original Blue Label Bazaar. Every time I find one and I check out the condition, they're just real trash. It's not that they're expensive, but it's just the real trash. But so I got this reprise issue. All right, so it's really, really late, and John and Yoko come out on stage, and some people start reacting, and hey, whatever, and they started playing this sort of like I guess it was a medley. Baby, Please Don't Go. You can see that in the video, in the Down Under. And then Yoko, as she's adding her characteristic, yowls to the song. And then they next start to play King Kong, a signature piece, by Frank Zappa, one of my favorite compositions of his. So they start playing that, and Yoko is starting to interject into it. This is an instrumental jazz fusion piece, and she's interjecting these howls and yowling, and Zappa cuts the song short. The presumption being that her howling annoyed him and was, not suited for the song. But then they move into, you can see how they move into this other, just like a basic blues jam that ended up being called Scumbag because John Lennon and Flo and Eddie, who were, at the show, Mark Volman and Howard Kalin, start saying Scumbag every, once in a while with the refrain. And then also Yoko predictably starts this howling, and Flo and Eddie start aping her and mimicking her. And at one point, there is like a bag put over her head. And then John Lennon takes his guitar and leans it by an amplifier to create feedback. And then he starts conducting the Mothers like Frank conducts them from time to time. And that, reportedly, Yoko was really pissed because she felt that John had abandoned her with that bag over her head. So, you can watch the video, all right? So this is the content that did, as Frank predicted, became an issue of dispute. And even though after the show, they were at a diner at some point, I don't know if it was immediately after the show, but John and Frank were at a diner and they worked out a verbal agreement that they would share the tapes and then they would release them each, on their own. The thing is that despite that verbal agreement, Frank really didn't make any effort to communicate with Lennon's manager and Alan Klein because to Frank, Alan Klein had a really bad reputation of being difficult to work with and not keeping his word. So next year, I think it was next year, Lennon released that material, but and I, now the name of the release that Rachel showed, it might have been in New York or something like that. He released it on that issue, but he'd retitled the portion that was King Kong. He gave it a new name and didn't provide any credit. All right, now I don't have a copy of this record or CD, so, check it out. Look on your issue, your copy, is there any credit, and then be aware of, do you have one that was published or released in 1972, or do you have a reissue? I don't think they ever sorted this out. And Zappa didn't release Scumbag until, the other thing about King Kong, not only they renamed it and they called it Jam Rag, which is a British euphemism for a tampon. So Frank wasn't happy. Now I believe it was Playground Psychotics. Eventually Frank released this material on his own. But there was a long-standing legal dispute between the two of them over the rightful ownership, of that material. And especially the annoyance that John Lennon, either himself or by proxy through the people that represent him, changed a song's title composed by someone else and then took the credit away, from that composer's piece. So that was an issue. So I suspect at that time the tea was hot. Well, let's talk about the record. As I said, this is a recording that people, Zappa fans, either really love or really hate, very few in the middle. And I'm kind of one of those people in the middle, and you'll see why, or hear why, I should say. You can see the cover, and I was showing this during a live stream on Rachel's channel. It looks like a bootleg. She made that comment. Oh, is that a bootleg? And on the back, you can, like the tape and, and everything's sort of handwritten. So yeah, it does represent kind of, a bootleg, which is kind of interesting because Zappa hated bootleggers because he was creating music that he would be playing publicly with the band, but would not end up on a recording for, several years until the band, he had worked out a total melody line and, the total song into a form that he really liked. And then it would get released on, record. There were quite a few songs, that were like that. And so this is kind of his, I think, his little diss at bootleggers and what they were doing. In a book I read about bootlegging, it was Frank Zappa and Bob Dylan. They were both cited as the two musicians who really, really, really had it in for bootleggers. And they've always kept a real tight control, over their material. Now, Bob Dylan, not so much anymore. He, sold it. Anyway, so the record has these series of songs, roughly the first 8 tracks, some songs which had been released earlier on other recordings, but other songs that were sort of composed during the show by Flo and Eddie, the Fluorescent Leech and Eddie, Howard Kalin, and Mark Volman, formerly of the Turtles. That's why they called themselves Flo and Eddie, because for a while, because of their contractual issues with the Turtles and the record company handling the Turtles, they could not use their real names in other things, in other ventures that they were doing. So that's how they came up with Flo and Eddie, as my understanding. Anyway, so it's this suite, and it's called the Groupie Opera. And it was contained a unit of songs that they were playing during the 70 and 71 tours. And this was also a concept that went into 200 Motels. So 4 of the songs that are part of this groupie suite made it into 200 Motels. And those songs were What Will This Morning Bring Me This Evening, Daddy, 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 Magic Fingers, and What Will This Evening Bring Me Next Morning. So those are the ones that made it into 200 Motels. The other songs that are here on this record, up until they sing Happy Together, are part of the groupie suite, because that was the whole shtick in these tours and for 200 Motels was touring can make you crazy. That was the theme, in that development. So the record is starting off with The Little House I Used to Live In. And that's got Volman, Flo and Eddie. They're making these like sounds, vocalizations to kind of go into it. It's an homage to Frank Zappa's first home in the LA area. And that's what he referred to it as, the little home I used to live in. That moves into Mud, Shark. So it was complete with a dance. And it was the description, the story that is being told in Mud Shark about this traveling rock and roll band, Vanilla Fudge, having a room at the Edgewater Inn, which is a hotel, a real one on the sea on Puget Sound that has rooms overlooking the harbor, just like it's described in the song. And I guess you could, maybe you still can, get a pole and stick it out your window and catch a fish. And as Frank describes, bring it into your room and do with it whatever you want. And this was this allusion to an incident that involved the making of a film, an incident that involved, I believe, John Bonham, and who was an observer, not necessarily a participant, a roadie from Led Zeppelin, and this redheaded girl, and what this guy and this redheaded girl did with a fish. And it was recorded by the Vanilla Fudge's drummer, so it was videotaped. Have no idea whatever became of that. But that's the background, on the Mud Shark. And then continuing, that theme about groupies. This is the opera, the groupie suite. Is the next song, What Kind of Girl Do You Think We Are? So it is just totally, presenting very clearly to the audience, this is the theme, of the show. Now, I've said before that because of Frank's experiences being in jail on a bogus pornography charge, he developed a considerable amount of empathy for African Americans, for the gay community, because he saw them in jail, the victims of a police state controlling everyone. So even though he made lots of songs, mocking African American culture and gay culture and gay people in general. He didn't have, in my opinion, I don't think he had any real animosity. He wasn't racist. He wasn't a homophobe. However, he was incredibly, in my opinion, self-absorbed and thought he could say whatever he wanted. I think that becomes evident in other music. But now, but he did have respect for people in these groups and what they endured through institutionalized racism and homophobia, and police violence against the poor. Well, groupies, on the other hand, Frank Zappa's debasement of groupies is genuine and sincere. So, he doesn't make fun of them in a loving way at all. And so this whole show is really, really taking a severe shot at groupies, which at times when you're listening to it, when I first heard this, I was 14 years old, all right? There were just a lot of things about the world I didn't know about. And one of the things in the world I didn't know about was misogyny and how it gets expressed. So while I still enjoy giving this a listen once in a while, it's not high in my rotation list because I, have issues with some parts of it. I'll keep going. So then it goes into the next song, Wanna Dick, which is this silly song praising penis prowess, for lack of a better description. So the idea was, all the members in the band, it was this competition, and members of the crew, there was this competition about how many girls they could get. And so it kind of turned, the person who was conquesting the most, into like this god. And you hear this, in the song Wanna Dick, that Wanna Dick is being almost, prayed to. But Frank was noting that even though there was somebody who was being recognized for a higher score, so to speak, in every one of their minds, they were all Wanna Dick, and you hear that in the refrain, I want a dick, you want a dick, me want a dick, it's just this really, really crazy mentality that, Zappa was making fun of. Then it goes into Latex Solar Beef, which I think has got the craziest and coolest hook in some of Zappa's live shows. Acetylene, Nirvana, steamroller, talk about your hemorrhoids, baby. That whole chorus and hook for Latex Solar Beef is just, to me, is just really, really incredible. Then we have a kind of a unique thing that shows up, and that is side one ends with Willie the Pimp, and then Willie the Pimp fades out. It's the instrumental Willie the Pimp. Then side two opens with Willie the Pimp part two, with it fading in. Now, the original CD that was released in the 90s didn't have Willie the Pimp part two, and there was a practical reason for that. It was later in the 2012 CD, it was reinstated. But the reason it was split like that on the record is that each part was from a different show, and there was just a subtle difference in time signatures, or actually the time that it was played, not the time signature, between the two songs, that putting those two parts together for the CD didn't make sense. You would hear a difference in the change in rhythm. So that's why, it was omitted. Then we get into Do You Like My New Car? And this is a reenactment of a true story. And one that Howard Kalin is quoted as saying it himself. This is what this is what this song is about, and how he sold it to Frank, the concept for the song, and basically the song is, somebody trying to impress a groupie, a girl, to get them to the hotel. I'm going to be leaving. I'm flying out of here. Go to Tierra del Fuego. So it's like, this is your only chance. And then he gets her to the hotel room, and he's just about to have sex with her. And then she makes this, you have a hit record, right? And so that, which throws him off, but I'll give you my goddamn hit record, and Frank added the notion of with a bullet, because that's in the parlance of music charts, when a record goes from like position number 10 to position number 1 overnight, that's becoming number 1 with a bullet. Anyway, Howard Kalin later revealed the backstory for that song. And it was the girl in question he knew was either 16 or perhaps even younger. He says that she was not 17. He knew that for a fact. But whether she was 16 or younger, he wasn't real clear on. And so, and he's taking her to the room, and the same kind of dialogue happens. She wanted to know about a hit and all this kind of thing, and he just wanted to do her. And so with that knowledge, I mean, it seems like he's admitting to statutory rape. Where this occurred, who knows what the age of consent was in the state that they were in, but it could quite possibly be an admission of statutory rape. All right, so for me anyway, knowing that really puts a new timbre on the song. Now you can listen to it and think that that's it's the whole scenario is really consensual, and you can think all you want about it, or you could even go the complete other way and listen or not listen to it at all. This is why some people have rejected this era of Zappa, because of a lot of the content is very similar to this particular incident. It even becomes more pronounced in Just Another Band from LA, but that'll be a different video. So, Howard Kalin was 24 at the time. This girl was no older than 16 and perhaps younger, but probably around 16, because apparently she was a representative of a country and won the Miss Universe for that country. Anyway, so yeah, it's something you either, and I'm sure I'm going to catch all kinds of hell and flack for some of this. I know I've said some things about Frank Zappa's material that, when you look at it and listen to it with the perspective of, for me, this is 40 years later, 50 years later, I'm not the same person I was when I was 14. I don't think like a 14-year-old anymore. And so when I learn more about some of this material and this song, it just puts a whole new spin on the entire experience with the album. And then the song, all right, so this song that could very well have involved statutory rape goes into the closing song of the opera, the Turtles hit song, Happy Together, which is a brilliant, brilliant orchestration and presentation of that song. It is great. The singing is just absolutely incredible on it. Just, transitioning from that one song to that one is, it was quite a move. Then the album is going to close out with 3 other pieces that are pretty much material from encores. The first one is Lonesome Electric Turkey, which is actually an excerpt from King Kong. Then there's Peaches and Regalia, great live version of that, and Peaches being one of those songs that Zappa and Zappa bands played during concerts, probably the most. Tell Me You Love Me is probably, ranking up there too. Then the show ends with Tears Begin to Fall. Very, very, very pop oriented song, again with Mark Volman and Howard Kalin providing just really, really, really good vocals, harmonizing. So, Fillmore East. And I know there's people that whose channels I watch who don't like this era of the Mothers and reject it totally. And others just kind of really dislike it. I guess I am taking maybe it's kind of a sick academic look. Because I recognize some really good music that is, in several points, in my opinion, terribly marred by the lyric content associated with it. Yeah, it is what it is. That's how I feel about this record. And like I said, I know that there are going to be people who just absolutely disagree, and that's cool. Just please be respectful in how you express your disagreement. The other option, of course, is, you disagree. Do you really need to say something? But anyway, I appreciate comments. I'm not afraid of them, but I do have a fairly hardline stance. They need to be respectful in how their ideas are being relayed. I'm still hunting for a Bizarre Blue Label copy of this. I just need one that's going to be in reasonably decent shape, like around very good or a VG plus. But the ones I've seen are, anything less than very good, I'm not going to buy, no matter how inexpensive it is. That's just kind of my limit when I'm buying used records. But I'll get it and eventually have it brought into the collection. When you collect a particular artist and you want to be a completist about it, you become a completist in spite of some of the material is not to your liking. So that's the way it is, because the overall catalog and the overall contribution Frank Zappa has made to the music world is incredible, incalculable. So I'm getting close to 40 minutes here in this long video about this record. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I, didn't bore you. But please remember to pray for the people inside your head, for they won't be there when you're dead.